Shalom, everybody. How you doing? Today is Wednesday, the 12th of August. Very, very happy to have all of you. Nice that you came and joined us today for our weekly live class shiur, whatever you like to call it, all about five Derech Eretz lessons taken from the weekly Torah portion, which this week is called Re'eh, and we'll talk about that word in just a moment. I just wanted to mention that I read on the thread of many people making comments about different things. I appreciate it. I love it. I enjoy answering your questions. Sometimes I'll ask you a follow-up. You may want to take a look at that. But it's some people have commented that at some point during the live video, my somehow the audio and my mouth don't match. Okay. And I'll be honest with you, I really don't know why that happens. I'm not really sure. But for some reason, sometimes or it might warp. Sometimes my voice may sound a little warped or that kind of a thing. Maybe sometimes the video gets stuck in something. I have no idea. I'm sorry it happens, but every once in a while I do see a comment that says, this happened and I can't hear you. You sound muffled or stifled. And then a few seconds later, oh, everything is okay. So God willing, hope everything's okay now. And I hope you can. I just did that on purpose. Thank you, by the way, again for joining us today. And hope your day is going well. Hope you're happy and healthy, God willing. So boom, let's just jump into this shiur today, this class, 5 Derech Eretz lessons from the Torah portion. Okay, once again, it's called Re'eh. It's towards the beginning of the book of Deuteronomy, the book of Devarim, the very last book of the Torah. And the very first Derech Eretz lesson we're going to focus on is found in Deuteronomy, Devarim, chapter 11, verse 26. Chapter 11, verse 26. Just as a little bit of a background, Moses continues his 37-day sermon. Right. 37 days. I'm sure that he took pauses in between. Maybe like people went to sleep. But he had a lot to say. This is the Jewish nation is ready in just a little bit to go into the land of Canaan, the Holy Land of Israel. He's repeating some laws that they want to know before they go in. He's introducing new laws that are divine laws from God. And here's the opening line of the weekly Torah portion called Re'eh. And not a big surprise, the first word is Re'eh, which means to see. Re'eh. There's again, chapter 11, verse 26. Re'eh anochi noten lifnechem hayom bracha uklala. Re'eh, look, see, behold, I present before you today a blessing and a curse. A blessing and a curse. This is what Moses says to the nation at this particular time in his 37-day sermon. Behold, see, Re'eh, today I present before you blessing and a curse. So, interestingly enough, as these Torah portions get closer and closer to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we see that there are themes that these Torah portions have that are related to making choices that will either bring us blessing or, opposite, they will bring us curse. And of course, the choices are up to us. What I wanted to focus on for this first Derech Eretz lesson is the word Re'eh. Re'eh, see. Re'eh is a singular, you, singular, see, which is an interesting choice of words because Moses is talking to the entire nation. And what he really should have said is Re'u, Re'u, you all see the blessing and the curse. Not just you personally, y'all see, behold, the blessings and the curses. So why is this word see, re'u, re'eh, in the singular when it really should have been a plural verb? A plural verb, the whole nation is listening. So a couple of answers. Number one, each person, says one commentary, needs to see the blessings and the curses for themselves. In other words, they need to choose the blessings and the curses. They need to choose to follow the Torah and the tradition on their own. They can't follow this on the coattails of their parents or their grandparents. Each and every person, whatever faith community you come from, you've really got to choose it on your own. You don't want to just become traditional observant in your tradition, whatever it is, just because your ancestor did it. Others may say, yes, do it because your ancestors did it. Of course, that has a heavy weight. But ultimately, each and every person has to choose and be embedded and be engaged and be involved in the religion on their own terms. They have to make that choice by themselves and on their own. They have to actively choose and commit whatever their faith religion is going to be. That's not the Derech Eretz lesson. The Derech Eretz lesson is this idea, say our commentaries. The Ibn Ezra, one of the great commentaries of the last many centuries, Ibn Ezra, says that the word Re'eh is singular because Moses is in effect saying, I am talking to each and every one of you personally. I'm talking to each of you personally. I know it looks like I'm talking to the nation, and there are, what, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people that are hearing this. How are they hearing it? That's a question for another time. Is one person, thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people? How do they hear it? Good question for another time. So this is what the Ibn Ezra says. Moses is saying Re'eh, telling the people, I'm talking to the group, but I want each of you to hear it as though I were whispering it into your own ear. The Derech Eretz lesson that some commentaries draw out from this is that when we go to a lecture, when we go to hear a speaker or any kind of a situation that is similar, we should look like we're listening. That's all. That's the first part of the lesson. Look like you're listening. Okay. Stare, eat pistachios, do whatever you want. Give eye contact. Every good speaker or lecturer likes to give eye contact to different parts of the room, as I'm doing now. But the listener, to ease it for the speaker, to make it easier for that person, to make them feel like they're talking to individual people, look at them, give them some eye contact. The deeper Derech Eretz message is to feel that the lesson you're listening to, if it's a Torah lesson, if it's a lesson in ethics or morals or whatever, a growth lesson. If you're listening about how to clean your car's carburetor, I don't think the same lesson would apply. But if you're listening to a growth lesson, something that will help you grow and develop spiritually, physically, emotionally, and otherwise, feel that that message is for you. Feel it's for you. And it's not for the person next to you, and it's not for the person behind you. Like you might say to yourself as you're listening to this lesson, boy, does the person behind me need to hear that message. Wow. I remember being an active pulpit rabbi in Stamford, Connecticut, and Baltimore, where many of my friends are listening at this time, I hope. They do pretty generally and pretty consistently. I remember being in the Good Shabbos line, Shabbat Shalom to the rabbi. How often people would say, Rabbi, that your message was so important today. I loved your sermon. It was excellent. I have about 5 friends that were sitting in the shul that really needed to hear that. And I would say to myself, oh, well, I'm glad I spoke to them. I was hoping to speak to you as well, but maybe I didn't. So that's the first Derech Eretz lesson today, is when we are listening to a growth type of lesson or lecture or shiur, whatever you would like to call it, it's for you. Make believe that they are talking to you because the lesson is going to be for you, and try to think of it that way. You will grow more from that lesson if you think it was tailor-made just for you. So, as Ernest Hemingway used to say, love that Ernie. Ernest Hemingway used to say, I think he quoted from somebody else's poem, therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. That's right, you can finish it with me. It tolls for thee. And every message that we hear at a synagogue, that's a growth-oriented message. It tolls for thee. That's the first Derech Eretz lesson that we have for today. Second Derech Eretz lesson. No less than 6 times in this portion of Re'eh is the idea of being bisimcha, is the idea of being joyous and happy mentioned. No less than 6 times. 12:7, chapter 12, verse 7. V'samachtem b'chol mishlach yadchem. You shall rejoice with every undertaking. This is not for funeral directors. It's with whatever we do, you shall rejoice. God has given you an opportunity. Rejoice in that undertaking. Chapter 12, verse 12. V'samachtem lifnei Adonai Elohechem. You shall be joyous before the Lord your God. Chapter 12, verse 18. V'samachta lifnei Adonai Elohecha. You shall rejoice before your God. Chapter 14, verse 26. V'samachta ata uvetecha. You should rejoice, you and your entire household. Chapter 16, verse 11. V'samachta lifnei Adonai Elohecha. You shall rejoice before God. Chapter 16, verse 14. V'hayita ach sameach. V'samachta b'chagecha. V'hayita ach sameach. You shall rejoice in your festivals, and during the festivals, you should be completely, namely, only joyous. Only joyous. Those were 6 separate verses in one Torah portion. I don't believe there's another portion like that that speaks to and addresses itself to how we need to be joyous in the worship and the service of God. 6 times. Now, they're all different contexts. Sometimes it means you should be happy, besimcha, with joy, when you bring a sacrifice. Sometimes it's when you give charity. Sometimes it's when you celebrate holidays. Sometimes it's when you consider the many blessings that God gave you. 6 times in one Torah portion. You know, it sounds to me like it's an important concept. So, be happy, be happy. Don't worry, be happy. Who sang it? Couldn't tell you. I don't remember. Was that Bobby Varon? Is that actually a person? I don't remember who it was, but okay, let's take the clapboard. Okay, clapboard. Okay, everybody who's watching and who will be watching this record, ready? Clapboard. Okay, everybody, be happy. Go ahead, be happy. Who's going to be happy with the clapboard just because somebody said be happy? Good luck. Go to a wedding, go to a simcha, go to a happy occasion, bar mitzvah, wherever you are. Comes the photographer around the table and says to everybody, smile. So everybody smiles. And I always wonder, why aren't people smiling anyway? Why do they need to be told to smile? You're at a wedding. You're at a joyous occasion. Why aren't you smiling? And the answer is happiness and being smilacious is hard to achieve all the time. It's even harder to sustain. How long can you be happy? How long can you sustain that? What, 5 minutes? Keep smiling? 10 minutes, an hour? You're at a wedding for 2-3 hours? You're going to keep smiling because it's so joyous? And it is joyous, but how long can you sustain that? I don't know if you ever found this out, but sometimes people tend to dislike people who are too happy or too chipper, right? In a workspace, somebody comes in, good morning, everybody, how you doing? And somebody will inevitably, oh, could you please turn that down? Can you please turn that down, for Pete's sake? Dennis Prager, the great author, lecturer, fabulous. He wrote a book called Happiness is a Serious Problem. And he talks about why it's hard to be happy. What are some ways to be happy? What's the Derech Eretz lesson here? I'll tell you what it is, dear friends. It's best illustrated by something that I remember in my Talmud class where I was a student at Yeshiva University many, I'll add another many years ago, early 1980s. 80 students in the room, maybe 70, something like that. The teacher, the rabbi who taught the Talmud class, he would take roll call in the beginning. And there was one particular student towards the middle of the roll call. It was alphabetic. Adler, here, people here. Schwartz, here. There was one particular student, I remember his last name, I won't mention it now, that every time the rabbi mentioned his name for attendance, he would, with liveliness. Here, I'm here. That's the way he would do it. And of course, the class would giggle. It was hard to tell by the rabbi's face whether he appreciated it, didn't appreciate it. Anyway, he went right along and went on to the next bunch of names. One Monday morning, we're all there, and the rabbi takes the attendance. He reaches the name of that individual, and instead of saying his usual happy, jovial, here, I'm here, he kind of mumbled under his breath, and he went, present. Just like that, with that kind of a face, present. The rabbi took note. We didn't realize he even took note of it at any one time. The rabbi says to him, let's call him Mandel. Mandel, you usually announce yourself with great enthusiasm and excitement. What happened? So Mandel says, well, to be honest, I had a lousy weekend. I had a lousy weekend. That's what he said. He didn't go into further details. I had a lousy weekend. So the rabbi says to him, it's a phrase I still remember, it still rings in my ear. The rabbi says to him, so if you had a lousy weekend, why should the rest of us suffer? Isn't that interesting? We had no clue that the rabbi took note of who responds how. If you had a lousy weekend, why should the rest of us suffer? So what's the Derech Eretz lesson? The Derech Eretz lesson is, I think, that smiles benefit you, the person, me. They benefit you and me personally. They benefit us. Wake up in the morning, look in the mirror and smile. It's going to make an impact on your day. But it doesn't just have an impact on you and me personally, but when we smile, we add a certain aura to wherever we are. When we smile, it adds something to the atmosphere and to the environment, which makes it more warm. It makes it more calm. It makes it more happy. It makes it more cheerful. And I think that's a very important Derech Eretz lesson. So, Elon, what are you telling me? If I don't feel good, if I don't want to smile, I should smile anyway? Yeah, I'm not saying to sit there for an hour with it plastered on your face, but I am saying every once in a while to give it a cheerful smile. Very nice. And I think that goes a long way. In Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, if you ever heard one of my lessons on a Monday night or a Monday day, it says there, greet everyone with a kind and pleasant ponim. Just put on a nice ponim. If you travel buses, like here in Israel, a lot of people travel buses, you can get on and see row after row of what we would call a fakrumta ponim. And then, thank God, some people get on the bus and they're smiling and cheerful and happy. And it can really change the entire aura of the bus or wherever you are. So that's Derech Eretz lesson number 2. The idea of being conscious of being besimcha, having joy, sameach, be happy, have a smile. It's good for you, it's good for me, and it's good for the other people who are around you. Derech Eretz lesson number 3. It says in chapter 14, verse 1, Banim atem lahashem Elokeichem. You are children of the Lord your God. Now, isn't that just a lovely sentiment? This is what Moses is saying in the name of God. You are all children of the Lord your God. You know, it's lovely, it's beautiful, it's simple, it's sweet, it's precious. It's just a precious way of looking at things, that we are all children of God. Except that the rabbis in the Talmud had a debate, and here was their debate. One great rabbi said, we are children of the Lord our God, but only when we follow the path and commandments that God gave us. When we're on the divine path, we are indeed children of the Lord our God. When we live as though God is our Father, then we can think of ourselves as his children. Otherwise, we can't consider ourselves as his children if we don't think of him as our Father. Another sage said, poppycock. He didn't say that because we would know how to spell that in Aramaic. Another sage says, no. He says in Hebrew, ben kach uven kach, whether you do follow God's instructions, commandments, mitzvot, or you don't, whether you do or you don't, you are always a child of God. That relationship of father to child can never be severed, ever. So no matter what you do, God may not be happy. He may have a proverbial grimace on his face when you do X or Y, but that relationship is always there, and it will never, ever be torn or cut or severed in any way. Derech Eretz lesson number 3. Each one of us is a child of God. Okay? I like the second sage. No matter what we do, God still considers us his children. So each of us enjoys a unique relationship with God. And here's the Derech Eretz lesson. When we get upset with others, or we insult them, or mistreat them, or belittle them, or bully them, or abuse them, or afflict other people, we are doing that to a child of God. That's the Derech Eretz lesson, to remember that when we do these things to other people, it's not just another person. We have done it to a child of God. From the poorest nobody to the richest somebody, each is a child of God. And therefore, in my opinion, we have to be careful to think before we speak, to think before we act. And just like a parent doesn't take well to others harming their children, neither does God. So, Derech Eretz lesson number 3, think of who that person is that you're ready to whatever. They are a child of God. So think twice before you say or do anything that's harmful or insulting. Derech Eretz lesson number 4 comes from chapter 14, verse number 18. It gives a brief summary right before that verse. It gives a brief summary of kosher laws that were from a previous Torah portion in the book of Leviticus. Here, Leviticus. The book of Leviticus, chapter 11, contains the kosher laws of the Jewish people. And here there's just a brief repetition, a brief synopsis, a frank synopsis, one of the greatest singers of all time, wasn't he? Chicago. Frank synopsis. Anyway, here it gives a brief summary of the kosher laws. Namely, domesticated animals are kosher if they have a split hoof and they chew their cud. Birds, fowl, we cannot eat birds of prey, which means they chew on each other. They embed their claws and they eat other things. We don't eat birds of prey. So if you see a bird with a siddur or a prayer book, can't eat them because they're praying. Fish must have fins and scales. So among all this listing of what's kosher, what's not kosher, we come to a bird that is not kosher. It's listed right there, and it's called the chasidah, which the rabbis have determined is probably a stork, the chasidah. The stork is listed as a non-kosher bird. So if you never heard of the term chasidah or stork, you probably have heard of the term chassid, somebody who's like very pious, a chassid, somebody who is kind, very generous, very gentle, somebody like that. So Rashi, the great French commentator of almost 1,000 years ago, Rashi says that the chasidah shares its food with its fellow birds. And that's why it's called a chasidah, because it does chesed. It does act of kindness with its fellow birds. And it's called a chasidah, like a chassid, kind, gentle, considerate. The Gerer Rebbe, I think 1800s, I may be way off. The Gerer Rebbe, there's still a Gerer sect of Hasidim, interestingly enough, huge in Israel. I think it's the largest Hasidic sect in Israel, all over the world. The Gera Rebbe said, if the bird is kind and sympathetic to its fellow birds, it should be kosher. Why is it not kosher? If it's so considerate to its fellow birds, why is it not kosher? And he gives an answer. It's only that way to its own species, but it's indifferent to birds of another feather. So basically, why is it not kosher? It's kind to its own, but not to others. It's kind to other storks. Here, you have some. I'm full. You have some. I see you haven't eaten. Please take some, take some. I don't need it right now. You probably need it. You look hungry. But when it comes to other species of birds, forget it. And that's why they're not kosher. Derech Eretz lesson number 4. Kindliness towards one's own is simply not enough. If we differentiate between a friend in need and a stranger in like circumstances, between our own kind and another, we are not considered kosher. Because goodness and kindness must be indiscriminate, and whoever needs help is deserving of help. And that's why the Hasidah, lovely name, indicates it should be kosher, kind, very sweet, but it only is kosher to its own. It's only kind to its own, and everybody else doesn't get nothing. And that's not a kosher way to behave. Derech Eretz lesson number 5, the last for today. Chapter 16, verse 17. There's a completion of the mention of the 3 pilgrimage festivals, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, Passover, Shavuot, and Sukkot, Feast of Tabernacles, Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks. And each time these celebrations came around during the year, there are 3 during the year, the Torah teaches that the people should come to Jerusalem and celebrate and do their offerings, etc., in Jerusalem for these holidays. You should know, by the way, that for Sukkot, which is this year, I think is going to be in early October, for Sukkot, there are thousands upon thousands of Christians and others who come to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles in Jerusalem. They want to fulfill that commandment in Jerusalem and to rejoice and be here at that specific time, but some do it for all the 3 pilgrimage festivals. Here's what the Torah says when you come for the festivals to celebrate and enjoy. V'lo yira'et pnei Adonai rekam. When you come, do not come empty-handed. Ish kematnat yado. Everybody should come with what they can give. Kevirkat Adonai Elohecha asher natan lach. You shouldn't come empty-handed, but you should come with commensurate with what God has blessed you. So some will bring animals for sacrifices. Some will bring birds for various kinds of offerings. Some cannot even afford that, and they will bring flour and oil, maybe other kinds of very simple, inexpensive ingredients for their offerings. What's the Derech Eretz lesson? It's very interesting. These verses are read on the Yizkor days of these 3 festivals. So, for example, on the last day of Pesach, these verses are read as part of the Torah reading. On the last day, the second day of Shavuot in the diaspora, on the only day of Shavuot in Israel, these verses are read. On the last day of Sukkot, these verses are read. When you come to this occasion, don't come empty-handed. Everyone should come with something commensurate with the way God has blessed them. So these are read on the last day of the holiday, and the last day of the holiday is also a Yizkor day, which means we have a special service on the last day of the holiday, or here in Israel on Shavuot, the only day of the holiday, where we do a remembrance service, remembering and asking God to bless the memories of all those in our immediate families and maybe close relatives and friends who have passed on, and we are here on that last day to remember all those who have passed on before us. What's the Derech Eretz lesson? The Derech Eretz lesson, my dear friends, is that we remember to remember, but sometimes we forget to bring on that day commensurate with the blessings. That's how the custom of giving tzedakah, giving charity in memory of the people we remember on the Yizkor day, that's where this tradition started. That we don't bring money to the synagogue because it's a yontiv, it's a holy day. We don't bring money to the synagogue. But either before the Yizkor day or after the Yizkor day, we make a charitable donation to an organization, needy people, etc., in order that those individuals that we remember should know that we have been charitable in their memory. What happens to them? They get greater and greater blessing wherever in heaven they are. Just by our giving charity in their memory, they get greater blessing in the world to come and in their ultimate reward. So that's the Derech Eretz component that we sometimes forget, that when we remember on those Yizkor days, it goes hand in hand with giving charity for the remembrance of those individuals that we so treasured and so continue to love, even in their absence. Dear friends, thank you so much for joining me today here on Facebook Live. Thank you so much for being with us for Parshat Re'eh, the portion of Re'eh. 5 Derech Eretz lessons in the portion. I hope that they are a blessing to you this coming week. I hope you stay well and healthy. And thank you very much for joining us today. Just be well. Maybe you'll tune in Monday again for Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, 1:30 in the afternoon on the East Coast of the United States, 8:30 p.m. right here in the land of Israel. Thank you again for being with us. Have a wonderful day and a good week. Shalom, everybody. Bye-bye.